So here I am with another project. I'll be working on sculpting this biblically accurate angel, and I have to apologize if I sound weird. I've been sick for the past 2 weeks. The video is pretty much self-explanatory, so I won't be talking that much. So here I am blocking out the sculpture, which means I'm just slinging the clay, putting it on the mannequin, just pushing it in. I'm using monster clay here. The one I use is medium, the viscosity. It comes in three viscosities, like soft, medium, and hard. I use medium because it's really good for big sculptures and miniatures too, and I do all of them. So here, just you see, I'm gonna be most of the video on time lapse because it was like a 7 hour footage just to put out a 35 minutes video, and I feel like it's boring just watching me pushing clay without shape or anything, and that's how it begins every sculpture. So as you see here, sometimes I gotta stop to use the tools and reshape as I go, and at the same time I gotta keep it symmetrical. That's why here I am measuring, making sure it's the same length, and cutting it up with my chisel like sculpting tool. Whenever I use my torch, you gotta look at it like if I'm melting the clay so that it can bond with the one that I pushed in previously, kind of like welding, if you might say so. So then I can start shaping it up with my wire tools and rakes like I'm doing in here. So it's gonna be kind of like repeating the process over and over again, using the torch to melt it, blend it in, shaping with the chisel, and then raking it out to make it kind of smoother. And you gotta keep repeating that process until you're happy with the overall shape. Here I am moving to the top, and you can already see the sharp edges starting to look way better than when I started. I really like the raking tools because I can really shape the sculpture real fast. Here you see me moving all around the sculpture to keep the shape symmetrical. Here's some ideas I do on a paper that I sent to the customer to see what she would like me to sculpt, because I don't really copy the same reference that the customers send me. I'd really like to tweak it a little bit and add some of my own ideas to it. So here I started sculpting what the customer shows. She shows the kind of like spikes, diamond spikes. I'm gonna call it spikes because that's what it looks like that I wanna be putting around the eye. So here you're gonna see a familiar tool that I'm using to sculpt an X-Acto blade. I end up using the spatula on the X-Acto blade, paint scrapers because they really help like get the shape down. They also help to keep sharp edges. I sculpt a lot of mechanical stuff and I'm always end up using every kind of blade I could find. Kind of like cutting the clay and it leaves a sharp edge and very clean edge. That's why I always have the X-Acto on my sculpting tools. Here I am using some mineral spirits with a small brush, kind of smooth out the sculpting tool marks. The smoother they are, the better when molding. The cleaner you can get them, the better. Because then you're gonna cast them and you got to sand and paint them. So you gotta take your time with the smoothing. Here start shaping the eye with some mini rakes and I'm gonna style it according to what the customer shows when I send her the drawings I made on the paper of the ideas I had. So here I'm switching to mold the spikes I just sculpted so I don't bore you with a time lapse of the same thing over and over again. I'm gonna use just regular cardboard from a box I had laying around, hot glue the walls to it, and then seal them so I don't get any spills. And here I was like, let me just finish sculpting the eye so I can mold both of them at the same time. So here I'm working on the edge design that the customer shows, and you're gonna see in a little bit I made it too big and I had to cut it down and fix it. Here's the overall shape. So I'm gonna start working on the iris now. Measuring, making sure it's in the center and symmetrical. And here in a bit you're gonna see what I was talking about. It was too tall, so I had to make it a little bit smaller. So here finally I noticed that it was too tall and I had to cut it down, shave it a little bit with the rake, and then add the piece that I cut down and blend it in because I didn't want to sculpt the iris again. Here I'm doing more shading because it was still too tall. And now I'm just gonna use the torch to weld it in and blend it in. So the customer said it didn't have to be a hyper-realistic sculpture, but I'm still using some real-life reference from Google because it doesn't hurt to have a reference to look at. Again, smoothing it out with the mineral spirit and getting ready to mold it. Once again, I'm using cardboard, and here I am crushing it and bending it to make the eye shape. Because if I do a square, it will take too much silicone, so I'm just doing the eye shape with the walls so I can do it kind of like closer to the sculpture and not waste that much silicone. Here I'm sealing it so I don't get some spill, and I think it looks pretty good. Now we're gonna test it out with the silicone pouring. So I'm using here Rebound 25. It's not meant to be poured. It's a brush on silicone, but I have used it in the past with pour on molds and it works great. You just gotta take your time when filling it up, keeping it with no bubbles and air pockets, and you'll be fine. Mix it up real good until you get an uniform color. And when you're pouring, you gotta do it on a corner of the mold walls like I did here. Never do it on top of the sculpture. And I did the same on the spikes and then blew some air on it to pop the bubbles. I think it looks pretty good here. So after a couple of hours, I just demolded, checked it, looks perfect. Let's check the eye. It looks pretty good. No bubbles, so that's good. Now I'm gonna use the Smooth Cast 300. Is my to-go resin for everything I do. And you just take your time to not trap bubbles. Sometimes I use a little stick if I see some bubbles to pop them out before it starts curing. And here, let's check it out. The first eye pull, kind of like some flaws in there, but overall it looks pretty good. So now I gotta repeat the process several times because that's the reason I made the mold, so I don't need to sculpt like 20 eyes all around the rings of the sculpture. And same with the spikes. Here I'm cleaning them up with my foredom and a sanding disc, because I'm gonna push it in the sculpture like you see in here. I use my torch to soften the clay and then push the eye cast onto it and blend it in. So I had to measure the ring and divide it in the eye quantity and come up with a space measurement between them so they can be symmetrical all over the ring. So here I am pushing all of them in and see how it looks. Because if one looks off, then I had to do it all over again. That's why I started with the middle one in the front, and I'm gonna do the same on the second ring, but the second ring won't have a middle one because one ring goes on top of the other. So it's gonna be kind of a little bit difficult, but I just have to figure it out like you see here. Take some material off with the wire tool and then use the torch to soften it a little bit more. It makes it easier to push the eye in, and it keeps in place, because when the clay hardens it just stays in place like if it was welded, like I said before. So I repeat the process with all of them until I have them all in place. And then here I move to the top of the ring because I have to thin it down and make it look like it's a ribbon attached to the head, like if it's not touching the head, kind of like making an illusion that is just floating around. So here, as you can see, I have to use the same technique on all the ribbons on top and bottom, so I can have the same effect all over the sculpture. Here I am trying some of the ideas with the spikes, because I didn't have a pattern in mind yet for the spikes. Now here I am going to do a little design I came up with, kind of like a diamond, and I'm gonna explain later on what is that for. I mean, it is a cool design, but it is gonna have a function that I will explain later on. So as you can see, I use a little piece of paper so I can have the symmetry, the same symmetry in all of them. And I just mark it with my tool. It's a wax carving tool that I'm using here. Here you can see the marks. And I'm just gonna take some material off with a mini wire tool. As you can see here, it's starting to look a little bit deeper. So that way it will be easier to cut later on, because the customer needs to see out of it. And obviously, as you can see with all that clay in there, it's gonna be hard to see out of it once you're wearing it. So I came up with the diamond idea, and I didn't want it to look like just two holes around the eyes. So my idea was to make a cool pattern and make it all around the rings, so it just looked like a whole design. But in the eye area, I'm just gonna use mesh so you can see through the mesh. Probably paint them gold so it will look better than just a black mesh. And I'll probably open all of them and add the mesh in all of them, because I want to keep the symmetry on the sculpture. Like, symmetry is very important to me. It messes with my OCD. So here I am repeating the process until I finish all of them. Then I'm gonna clean them up. Here you can see all the pattern in all the rings. And then I'm gonna be adding some holes here because it also will have 4 wings in the back, so I need to take care of that. And yes, I am using my drill on monster clay, and it actually works pretty good to my surprise. It's not the first time I've done it. Here you can see it's easy, and clay is so soft you don't even have to push it in. You just go slow and let it dig in. I'm gonna clean it up here with the rakes. So I was pretty happy with the overall look so far, but I have to revisit the rings and make it wider around the eyes so I can have more room to fit the spikes how I wanted them. Just kind of like adding a lip, a little bit of a lip, so I can make it wider around the eyes. And then I'm just blending it in. I didn't know if it was going to look good, but here in a minute you can see it all finished. And when I add it to all the eyes all around the sculpture like you see here, now it's just cleaning and shaping, refining the detail and smoothing it out. And here I am trying the spikes again on the new lip. I'm trying different patterns. I think I like this one better. Smooth it out again with the torch and some fine rakes. Here I am using some, they kind of like cheap brush and some fine brush. You need to look at it like sandpaper. Like the cheap brush will work as a coarse grade sandpaper, and then the fine brush will kind of work like wet sanding, if that makes sense. So you're gonna see me here using the little brush that have the cheap brush bristles, and it's gonna get rid of all the marks that the sculpting tools leave. Here you can see it after a little bit of adding mineral spirits, it starts kind of like melting it. You just gotta take your time and be careful with those edges because it's gonna melt your edges, and then you gotta go over it again with the sculpting tool, clean it up. So here can you see after a while it just starts to smooth out real good, and it's gonna erase the marks of the tools, but it's gonna leave brush strokes. So that's why I use two types of brush. You're gonna see in a minute I'm gonna switch to the fine ones. Like I said, you gotta be careful with those sharp edges. Here I am cleaning them up because I melted too much the detail. I'm using a little wire tool, like a fine wire tool, to clean up all that design, the eyes, everything that has sharp edges. I had to clean it up before using the fine brush. So it's kind of like repeating the process until you're happy with the result. You're gonna see the surface. After a while, the mineral spirits dries out, and you see it if it's good or if it needs a little bit more. Here you can see the difference, how much better it looks. So here to go even further, I'm gonna be using some chopped towels with mineral spirit, and it's very important you wear gloves because you shouldn't be touching the mineral spirit with your hands. So I never seen anybody using this technique. I just kind of discovered it by myself. I just wanted to try and go even smoother than the brushes, and I kind of discovered that the shop towel soaked in mineral spirits works really well. And here I am just kind of pushing lightly, giving it a final cleanup with the wire tools because the mineral spirit keeps melting. So you gotta be careful with those edges like I said before. So this is the cast I ended up with, the first cast. It's kind of a bit heavy right now because I always use the method slush casting, and you see it's really thick right there. And I'm not a big fan of making a two-part video, but I felt like if I only did one video for this whole build, it was gonna be like 2 hours of a video. So I'm gonna split it in two parts, and on the next video I'm just gonna show how I finish this. I still have to add the wings, that's why I have those holes in there. And to explain the little design that I made, this those are have to be open up, because that's where the person's gonna see out of. I'm gonna add some mesh, I guess, either mesh or plastic mesh or metal mesh, I don't know yet, whatever looks best. So yeah, this is gonna be it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.